Hey, 42 here. In 1928, archaeologist Giulio Tello was poking around in the deserts of Peru, searching for long-lost treasures. When he unearthed what appeared to be a burial ground containing hundreds of ancient bones. The burial site belonged to the Paracas people, an ancient culture that thrived in the area almost 3,000 years before. Tello had only recently discovered evidence that the Paracas people existed, so he was still in the process of quite literally piecing together the mysteries of this long-forgotten civilization. And contained within this burial pit was the biggest mystery of them all. As expected, it was full of what appeared to be human remains, but there was something off about them. The ancient skeletons looked much like the many thousands of others found by archaeologists all over the world for hundreds of years, except for one thing: the skulls. You don't have to be a medical student to know roughly what a human head looks like when you take all the meat off. But these specimens were nothing like any skulls Tello, or anyone else for that matter, had ever seen before. They were impossibly elongated, looking more like something you'd find in a modern sci-fi film than an ancient grave. Their strange appearance gave rise to many controversial theories. Some have speculated that the skulls belonged to a previously undiscovered, super-intelligent subspecies of human. Others believe the skulls are of extraterrestrial origin, belonging to aliens who first visited Earth many millennia ago to impart their wisdom on ancient tribes and advance the development of human civilization. Interestingly enough, the Paracas did indeed possess many technologies and insights that seem to suggest an otherworldly helping hand. They developed sophisticated irrigation systems that made agriculture possible in the baking Peruvian desert. They were also responsible for some of the most intricate textile designs known to the ancient world. And they had an incredibly advanced knowledge of medicine, even performing primitive forms of brain surgery. These so-called alien skulls haven't just been found in Peru either. Since Tello's discovery, similar skulls have been unearthed in Asia, Africa, the Americas, and many places in Europe, with some of them up to 12,000 years old. In fact, evidence of ancient civilizations with elongated heads stretches back so far, it predates written history. The earliest written mention comes in the form of a poem by the Greek poet Hesiod, written somewhere between 750 and 650 BC. The poem mentions a society of people known as the macrocephali, literally meaning the big-headed ones. So, who exactly were these so-called big heads? Could they really have been an ancient society of globe-trotting aliens who've been visiting Earth throughout the ages to give us pin-headed humans a nudge on some of the trickier problems in medicine, agriculture, and art? Or were they an ancient subspecies of big-brained humans who've since died out and all but disappeared from the history books? Could it be that the critically panned film Coneheads was actually based on a true story? Okay, so you're probably not going to be surprised to hear that there's a perfectly good, albeit quite strange, explanation for how Tello's ancient skulls came to resemble an H.R. Giger painting. Sadly, it doesn't involve aliens, but it's interesting nonetheless. You see, these unusual heads were created for a process known as artificial cranial deformation, which uses various binding and compression techniques to deliberately change the shape of the human skull. As you'll already know if you're a parent, have young nieces and nephews, or just happen to like prodding newborns in the head. When babies are born, their skull isn't one solid mass like an adult's. Instead, it's made up of several plates with gaps in between called fontanelles. These unfused bones make a baby's skull relatively malleable, something that comes in particularly handy as a child passes through that most ancient torture device, sometimes known as the human birth canal. Malleability also helps a child's skull to expand as the brain within it grows. By the way, the word fontanelle is derived from the French word fontaine, meaning a natural spring or source of water. It's a fitting name, really. Much like natural springs, babies also release vast quantities of liquid. Best not to drink it, though. Anyway, the malleability of a baby's skull means it can be reshaped, a property cultures all over the world have taken advantage of throughout history. Some bound the head with cloth. Others strapped the child into a modified cradle board that literally pressed the head into the desired shape. Whilst the methods varied, the timing didn't. Cranial deformation processes usually started around a month after birth, continuing for a period of around 6 months, but sometimes for years. Once the bones in the skull had fused, the process was complete, and the skull retained its new shape permanently. Now, before I go any further, I should probably include a disclaimer. Please don't try and create your own pointy skulls out of any children or younger siblings that happen to be lying around at home. Growing up's hard enough these days without having to worry about explaining why you have a giant cone head. Plus, finding hats that would fit would be a nightmare. So, why the hell would anyone go to all of this trouble to give their child a pointy bonce? I mean, there are easier ways to stand out from the crowd. A brightly coloured t-shirt, for example, or a particularly daring pair of socks. The most common reason for this unusual practice was to demonstrate social status. In many cultures, head binding was reserved only for those in position of power. A person with an elongated head was instantly recognizable as someone of great importance, as opposed to all the peasants with their boring, regular-shaped heads. Some societies also believed that elongating the head will cause the brain to function better, though to date there's no evidence to suggest the practice had any positive or negative effects on brain function. As well as status, many ancient cultures found elongated skulls to be attractive, and the perfectly conical head was seen as a symbol of genuine beauty. That might seem odd to us contemporary-minded types, but concepts of beauty have of course changed significantly all throughout history. In Japan, purposely blackened teeth were once considered incredibly attractive. In ancient Greece, a woman with a big bushy monobrow would never fail to get a man's heart racing. And in China, the bone-crushing practice of foot binding was a must if you're going to bag yourself a fella. Nobody knows for certain why some ancient civilizations came to believe that when it came to heads, bigger was better. Some historians have suggested the practice might have originated as a desire to imitate the skull of a jaguar, which would have been a much feared and respected animal for many ancient jungle-dwelling cultures. Others believe it stemmed from wanting to appear godlike. The Maya maize god, for example, supported a lovely pointy head that resembles the Paracas skulls. Another theory is that the practice originated in some cultures as an attempt to appear like those original social influencers, the ancient Egyptians. Although most historians dismiss the idea that artificial cranial deformation was performed in Egypt, some mummified remains have shown evidence of elongated skulls that are thought to have been caused by a naturally occurring condition called macrocephaly. The ancient Egyptian civilization was, of course, hugely influential. So it isn't implausible to think that a well-known pharaoh with an oversized noggin might have given rise to the idea that big heads equal power, status, beauty, and majesty. And, of course, ancient Egyptians are often depicted as having elongated heads in murals and sculptures. Even though that's thought to have been a stylistic exaggeration, it could still have sparked the idea that a big long head was the season's must-have accessory. Of course, today, the thought of squashing a baby's head until it resembles a traffic cone sounds somewhat questionable. But apparently, not everyone would agree. Because it turns out, artificial cranial deformation is still carried out in parts of the world to this day, including in Vanuatu and the Democratic Republic of Congo. It was also carried out across Europe right up until the 20th century. Whether it's a king wearing a crown, a football fan donning his team's shirt, or that dodgy geezer down the pub with the fake Rolex, we humans have always looked for ways to display our identity and status through our appearance. Sometimes that extends to modifying ourselves physically with piercings and tattoos, or Botox and plastic surgery. Artificial cranial deformation may be a bit more extreme than jamming a steel rod through your tongue or inflating various parts of your body with silicone, but you could argue it's all a similar brand of crazy. Thanks for watching.